Hey, Steve Saretsky here. Welcome back to the show. Not a whole lot to touch on this week, but wanted to kind of highlight some comments about what's happening in Canadian real estate markets and really highlighting some of the winners and losers and kind of how I see this shaping up. Because I think there's some really, really important takeaways here. There's a chart going around on Twitter showing, what's happening in the national housing market, right? And so if you look at the national home price benchmark, clearly peaked in 2022, kind of fell, rebounded, now we're sliding lower once again. So from the peak, national home prices are now down 14%. So 14% since peaking. And that's a pretty significant, it's one of the steeper declines in Canadian history going back 30 plus years. And so we are in this sort of momentous event that is happening that many people have not seen or been through. And so, but it's funny to see, right? We talk about the national housing market, but the reality is the bulk of the corrections thus far has actually really been concentrated in Ontario, and in particular in the GTA. If you look at the GTA, I think they're down like something like 4% year over year. Calgary, meanwhile, up 12% year over. There's a huge gap, right? You're talking about close to a 15% divergence between two markets. And so, again, you don't have a national housing market, but I think it's really important to highlight ultimately what is happening. And because everybody kind of paints the market with a broad stroke. I'm here in Vancouver. I deal in this housing market on a day-to-day basis. And it's very easy to pinpoint the winners and the losers. And I think that's going to be magnified over the coming years. And so one of the winners we can see, right, is, if you bought a house on the east side of Vancouver, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, you've done tremendously well. That area continues to sort of densify. The value of the dirt has increased as densification has increased. And then you go over to the west side of Vancouver, where it was typically dominated by, foreign capital. It kind of got hollowed out in 2016 by the flood of capital that was pouring in from China into that market. And really, since the introduction of foreign buyers taxes, empty homes taxes, now we've got this federal foreign buyer ban to clamp down on some illicit funds. And that market's been stagnant. It has gone nowhere, basically, over the last 8 years. I mean, there's a good chunk of that west side market that peaked in 2016 into 17 and has gone nowhere. Here we are in 2024. So again, keep in mind, that's almost 8 years of no home price appreciation. Again, if you start now adjusting for inflation in real terms, home prices are indeed falling. And so again, really want to highlight winners and losers. And I think this is where we're starting to see, I love these markets because I think this is where I'm able to sort of cut my teeth. You're showing a lot more value. The days of everybody getting their real estate license and just pumping the bags of the housing market. You buy anything, get into the market, and promoting just crap, and ultimately burning clients. And there's no real knowledge or education gap there, just basically putting clients into crappy stuff. And so one thing I really want to highlight is, again, when we talk about winners and losers, bad advice and bad financial decisions are finally coming home to roost, which is really the essence of financial markets, capital markets. It's like, there should be a discrepancy between a good investor and a bad investor. And of course, when you get into this liquidity bonanza that we had over the last 10 years, right? Zero interest rates, massive quantitative easing programs, huge fiscal deficit spending, inflating the housing bubble. It basically means you can buy any piece of crap and it will go up. And so there was a lot of poor decisions that have been made over the last 5-10 years. And again, we're only now seeing some of those poor decisions basically being exposed. And one of the ones I really wanted to highlight was in particular, some of these luxury high rises that were sold as pre-sales in downtown Vancouver that are now finally completing. And you're seeing the magnitude of the losses that are compounding on these buyers that have now closed on these units and are trying to exit the market. And they've gone no bid and they're taking significant losses. And so, one of the ones I flip through and I watch this stuff all the time, and it's just amazing, right? I remember when they sold some of these buildings out at $2,600 plus or minus a square foot, and you're going, well, hold on a minute. You can go and buy completed product across the street, comparable completed product across the street in the resale market that's a year or 2 years old for, $1,500 a square foot. Basically, there's $1,000 a square foot gap between pre-sale and resale. And so, you look at some of these units that are closing. I mean, I was looking at an example this week where, they had paid $3 million as a pre-sale, and the price was listed and has now been dropped to $2.3 million. So you're going from $3 million bucks what you paid pre-sale. You tied up that, a good chunk of that capital for several years. You're now closed on it. You're reselling it at 2.3. It still hasn't gone a bid. Meanwhile, you're not factoring the GST that you paid on, the property transfer taxes you paid on, now the realtor fees you paid on. You're talking about a 7-figure loss, $1 million loss, which is unfathomable in the Vancouver real estate market dynamics that we've been so accustomed to over the last 20 years. And so, again, I can count multiple examples of this. This is not just a one-off unit. You go into this building, another, we got some more luxury units that are completing in the coming 3 to 6 months. Of course, being on the front lines, I get all the marketing promos that are being sent to me saying, hey, assignment, come buy this. We're assigning it, we're selling it below what we paid for it 4 years ago as a pre-sale. So just take it off my hands. But the reality is again, the discount isn't significant enough. If you paid $3,000 a foot and you say, well, listen, I'll give it to you for $2,700 a foot, I'm willing to take a loss from $3,000 a foot to $2,700 a foot. I'm sorry, but that's just not a good enough deal. I mean, the market's probably closer to $2,000 a foot. So you might think you're, giving someone a deal because, well, listen, I'm taking a huge loss on this. And again, it's still not enough. And so I'm kind of focused on this and watching it. I think particularly these markets that were dependent on a lot of the foreign money coming into the markets, I think are going to continue to probably struggle in the dynamic, particularly here in Canada, where you have all these bans and taxes around foreign ownership, empty units, etc. It's not a very compelling place to put capital. I'm also looking at the domestic pressures that are emanating over in China. We're seeing residential property prices in China rolling over. The central bank chief has come out in recent weeks talking about the lack of credit growth in the country. And so as that property market struggles, you start to want, and as all these countries become more protectionist and who are swinging politically to the right, we're kind of in this more nationalistic environment that are you going to get those capital inflows to support the luxury markets in places here like in Vancouver? And again, I would remind you all, I mean, not that I really need to, but, Chinese capital are shopping destinations for Chinese buyers. Canada ranked at the very top of the list. And so, again, I think there's going to be a lot of winners and losers. There's still money to be made in Vancouver real estate, Calgary real estate, Toronto real estate. I just think now it takes a lot more sophistication. It takes good advice. I mean, there's so many examples here. I flagged a lot of these pre-sale projects years ago to our own independent clients, and try to steer people away from this stuff because this was so obvious. Again, when you had the pre-sale product at $26 a foot and the resale product at $1,500-$1,600 a foot, the gaps were just so wide, but everyone was just like so enthralled with these fancy presentation centers. And pre-sales, I heard everybody makes money from pre-sales. This is a reputable developer. I should just plug all my money into it. And again, not really doing any due diligence and getting proper consultation or advice. And so again, for those that are paying attention, that actually want help with the real estate transactions, this is what I do for day-to-day living. I try to put as much information and advice as I can in these videos. But if you do want to have that consultation and work together, I've put a link below. There's a calendar thing that you can go and schedule a call with myself. But I think this is where, again, I love these markets. Everyone talks about the down markets, the tough markets. this is great because this is where you can actually, you have to show your value, you have to show your proof, you have to show your work. And I think that we're in that environment today where we're going to continue to see the winners and the losers. And so it's, we're in this new regime. Rates are coming down 25, 50 basis points, maybe 75. That's not going to change the market. There's still a lot of issues underlying. And so I think there's some good opportunities out there. I think there's going to be a lot more bag holders that we're going to see. We're going to see more developments going under and that sort of thing. And so this is a fantastic environment for those that are looking for opportunity, and for those that are actually in love with it and passionate about the markets. And so again, for me, I love, cutting my teeth in these kind of markets and these kind of environments. And so again, I hope these kind of examples have brought to light the differences and the divergences in different markets. And again, I really think that now that the era of the easy money is kind of fading away, we're going to see, again, the winners and the losers in these two markets. So that's all I got for this week. I'm going to be watching Canada's CPI, inflation CPI data coming out next week. I believe we also have GDP numbers coming out at the end of the week. And so I think that's going to be important, particularly leading up to the Bank of Canada's July rate announcement and what they do there. So as always, hope that helped. See you next week.